Hi, so I just finished this humongous book right here called A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. This is a well-loved book. What I mean by well-loved is it has like a really high recommendation rate. Before I read this book, I am first aware that it is depressing, and two, there were a lot of trigger warnings. I read this book keeping all of that in mind, but I didn't really know what the book is about. I just thought since a lot of people talked about this book, it's definitely worth the read, even though it's like over 800 pages. This copy is over 800 pages. Okay, first I want to talk about like the overview of this book. Overall, I actually did not like this book as much as I thought I would. I thought I'm going to be broken or just sad, and I thought I would cry. I haven't found a book that made me cry in such a long time. I ended up looking at this book objectively. I don't know why I did not connect with the characters. In fact, from the beginning towards the middle of the book, I hated all of the characters. I thought they were petty, and I felt really bad and guilty, and I thought, why do I feel like this? Why am I not connecting to the characters? Why don't I feel sad about this when it's supposed to be sad? I was worried for myself, and I thought I was starting to be a psychopath. I realized that I don't really like books that are depressing or sad, that has like a very pitiful main character. However, this one, when I talk about it objectively, I did not like it. I would have given this 2 stars. But hold on, I can explain. But I don't want to be a psychopath, and because I am not a psychopath, out of pity towards the character of Jude, at the very end, I felt his pain just a little bit, and I thought everything that he had to go through, all his suffering, were completely unnecessary to make this book impactful, because it already is. All of like the mishap that Jude has to go through one after another just didn't feel connected to each other, if that makes sense. It just didn't make sense to me, and because out of that pity, I ended up giving this a 4 star. From 2 stars, I bumped it into 4 stars. Now, this is why I did not like this book. Like I said before, it didn't make sense. It is completely unfathomable to me for someone like Jude, who is so broken and so traumatized, who is, by the way, also suicidal, to be able to maintain any relationship at all, friendship and romantic relationship, to be able to go to college, graduate college, and somehow become a successful lawyer. It just, those two don't go together from what I've read so far, or from the minimal experience that I have towards pain and failure. It just doesn't fit together. I'm gonna focus on Jude because this book, I think, is not about 4 friends. It's mainly about Jude. To me, he has all of the makings of a serial killer, and I would have preferred that direction more, to be honest, because otherwise Jude shouldn't have suffered so much in this book. It's like his backstory just did not match his character and his personality. It just felt too forced and too fictional, like it's actually written. I mean, I know it's written, it's a book, it's fictional, but what makes a book great, what makes a fictional book great, is if it makes you feel like you're actually reading from experience rather than an actual just storytelling. In this book, I felt like I wasn't reading Jude's story. It's like I was reading a story. I suppose that is the reason why I didn't connect with Jude, especially from the beginning towards the end, like almost to the end. I just saw him as a petty person because I did not understand his character. Like it wasn't connecting to me. Or maybe I'm just not empathetic, or maybe I am a psychopath. I don't know. It just did feel like that. Overall, I think this book feels like looking in instead of experiencing it. Does that make sense? It just feels like handbook knowledge, hand-me-down knowledge from people. When you listen to other people's journey and pain and recovery, it's always a summed up version, and they're always put in like this spotlight where it's, you know, they make it seem more friendly when they tell their story, and so you absorb that story and then you just add it to many other stories that you picked up along the way. It just felt like hand-me-downs, and it wasn't from experience. And obviously it's not from experience because it's not autobiographical, but what makes a great writer is when they write books that makes it feel so real that it seemed like it is an autobiography of someone. And especially a book like this where it talks about life, struggles along the way, and recovery. Like I said before, it feels like the author took all of these little stories from different people that, and like movies and TV shows or whatever, and put them all together and filled the gaps from his imagination, which would have made sense if it is maybe a fantasy book. What I think was missing in this book is research. Instead of filling in the gap, he could have maybe, is he a man? I don't know, the author interviewed people who has gone close to that experience and probably have first-hand experience on recovery and trauma and rape. I think that would have made a great difference, but it is what it is. And I understand why people love it so much. It's just, it's not for me. I'm coming from, you know, the perspective of someone who doesn't like depressing books, so take it with a grain of salt. So that is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, a book that is worth a conversation. I actually put down a lot of my thoughts in this book, and maybe I'll read one or two. Okay, now first of all, it reminded me a little bit of Fault in Our Stars. You know, that plot twist. It is parallel to what has happened towards the end of the book. The plot twist. I'm not gonna be talking about that in detail because that would like give away a lot. The twist in the end, I saw it coming. Like, it was pretty obvious from the start. Let me see what else I can talk about. I'm going through all of like the text that I highlighted, and I also included some of my thoughts. So there is this text here where he talked about success. It goes like this. The thing he hadn't realized about success was that success made people boring. Failure also made people boring, but in a different way. Failing people were constantly striving for one thing, success, but successful people were also only striving to maintain their success. I had to disagree. In this particular text, talked about success and failure as if they're at the opposite end of the spectrum. Success is not the opposite of failure, and failure is not the opposite of success. It is much more complicated to talk about it in one paragraph or in a couple sentences. Where there is success, there is failure, and when there is failure, there's definitely success. Failure is the shadow of success. To be able to be successful, you have to go through a series of failures. That's just how it works. There is another text here, the glorious years. The years when everything seemed drawn in fluorescence were gone. Everyone had been so much more entertaining. What had happened? So here he was talking about his friends, and back in the day, everyone was apparently more interesting or more, like, I guess, more fun. And that's the thing that we miss out with people, is that they change. People change. It's an obvious thing. It's something that we all know. It's a fact. But the thing that is hard for some people to understand is change isn't an outside thing. It's okay to change, but not like the people around us. People change. And your friends are not exceptions. It's just much harder for some people to accept change if it happens in their circle, in their lives. It's like losing someone, dealing with someone's death. You know it as a concept until it happens to you. If you learn to accept that even your friends change, then it's definitely gonna be easier to live. Okay, so there is a really interesting text here. It goes, the important thing he came to realize was to eliminate them, not just to store them. He was talking about pain. You relieved them, pain, again and again until they were neutralized, until they became near meaningless with repetition, or until you could believe that they were something that had happened to someone else and you had just heard about it. You held the scene in your head like a film strip, and then you began to erase it frame by frame. I don't agree. That's not how you recover. For me, recovery is learning to deal with pain, bringing the baggage along with you, and learning to live with the baggage and not abandoning the baggage or pretending that it's not there. It felt like advice coming from a 20-year-old again, instead of like 30 to 40-year-old. You don't learn to forget. You learn how to carry it, because it's all temporary solution. It's just really disappointing to read. But although there is this part here that I totally agree with, and the text goes, knowing that he didn't have to keep going was a solace to him somehow. It reminded him that he had options. It reminded him that even though his subconscious wouldn't obey his conscious, it didn't mean he was still in control. This is something that sadly and surprisingly to some people, and I'm kind of iffy talking about, there are times when I felt suffocated by life, but knowing that I could end it whenever I want gave me solace. Not that I'm going to, not that I'm actually going to end it. It's just knowing that I could gave me comfort that I needed at that moment. This line right here is what I'm talking about. It felt like it came from experience and not something that you read about movies, you know. It's something that you hear from people who has actually been there. So I really like this text. There is also this part here where it says he would have taken him, Willem, just woken to the perfumer in Florence. Here he would have said, this scent, I want you to bottle this. I wrote this short story before when I was younger. I called it Empty Jar, and in this short story, two friends, a boy and a girl. So the boy died, but before he died, she, the girl, took an empty jar, opened it, and asked him to blow on it, and then she sealed it. And so it is an empty jar, but it's not really, because it's his last breath. And so it reminded me of that story when I read this part. It's like when you lose someone, what you really miss the most is the scent. It's just really nice to read. I really like that. Okay, so this is the last part. There is this text here. It says, don't try to get people to like you. Never try to make yourself more palatable in order to make your colleagues more comfortable. I do not agree. That's not something that you say to people. That's not an advice. That's not a good advice, in my opinion, because it's not very realistic, and you're gonna be heartbroken and disappointed if you follow that advice. Because to be able to exist in this society, you have no choice but to actually find a way to be liked. Otherwise, you'll just end up alone and sad and distant. I also used to think like this, like I have to be alone, like fuck everything, I'm good on my own, I'm better on my own. But it's really just a very narcissistic point of view. Of course, people matters. What people think, it matters. What they think matters, because we all exist in this one society. You cannot possibly expect to, I don't know, triumph in the world where everyone hates you. You need friends, you need help. And what people think, quite surprisingly, matters. Reputation is everything. What doesn't matter is how you take that, what they think of you, by heart and overthink it, because that affects you already, and that you should stop. Learn to control it instead of escaping or ignoring that other people exist. So that is A Little Life. I'll leave it here, and I'll see you on the next read. Bye!